What's the earliest family video I have? It's old, and it captures what technology and life used to be back then. Up until 1983, my birth year by the way, the only way to capture memories or video was through Super 8 film, unless you had a TV station in your house and you were a millionaire. And if that wasn't the case, you had to settle for Super 8 or 8mm film. What is Super 8 or 8mm? It's a similar format to videotape, only it's not really videotape. It's still a strip of plastic, but instead of having a magnetic coating on top of it to record the signals, you would literally have a light-sensitive coating of emulsion that would react to light. Why is it called Super 8? Well, the actual film strip itself is 7.9 millimeters wide, but the frame size is 5.79 millimeters, which is larger than the previous consumer film format, 8mm, which had an effective frame size of 4.5 millimeters. So Super 8mm increased the frame size to 1.29 millimeters. But enough with the technical aspects. What about my family history, my family videos? So if you've been checking my previous videos, you would know that our first camera was not acquired until the year 2000. And before that, we would borrow cameras to record family events. But the earliest recordings I found were from 1990 and one from 1987, and before that there's no video of anything. What we do have is a wedding film from my parents' actual wedding in 1974. I don't know the specifics how they arranged for the wedding to be filmed. All I know is that they asked a friend that happened to have a Super 8 film camera to go and record as much as they could, I guess. My parents don't really remember the specifics about it. They were obviously more concerned about getting the wedding together and having everything work. The conditions and the circumstances on how this was shot are pretty much a mystery by now, and all I can gather is from the actual footage and film itself. This trek started back in 1995 when I realized that I had always been seeing these 3 flat blue white cans laying around in the house for years, but I never really thought about asking my parents what they were. So one day, I was 12, and I asked my mom what those things were. And she answered, "Oh, that's our wedding." And that blew my mind, because even though I was 12 and in the middle of videotape era, I still knew what film was and how a big deal it was in the movie industry in that time. So it was so exciting to know that in the house we had film cans. About a year later, I was becoming more independent and I could walk around the neighborhood more freely. So I come across this photographic wedding studio that also advertised that they worked with video. And I walk in and I ask the guy at the counter, he seemed to be the owner because he seemed pretty old and knowledgeable, and I asked him if he could transfer 8mm film into video. And he told me that sure, he could transfer it. He would just take a film projector and project it onto a white wall and get a video camera and record that. Which horrified me, just completely horrified me, because, well, knowing the limitations of video cameras and how sensitive film can be, and it just didn't make any sense to me. Even though I was 13, I knew the implications of film transferring. I wasn't an expert, but I knew the basics. But again, I think I was being unfair, because back in 1996, who would have access to a film scanner in a small neighborhood, in a small wedding photography studio? So that was my first of many attempts to find a service that would handle film in the best possible manner with the best professional ethics and the best technical knowledge. Now, you have to take into account that these films were not kept in the best condition, and I knew that, but I couldn't do anything about it. I had no resources to take care of them properly, so I knew I would only get one shot at handling this. I didn't want to touch the film itself. I didn't want to expose it to the outside to get dust on it or scratch it on a film projector. So that's why I was really picky on what method I was going to use to transfer this. I don't want to drag this any further, but around 2012, I found this website called the Film Transfer Company that at the time seemed like the best service I could find. Well, there's a caveat to why I'm saying at the time, because I actually thought I could find something better. And this is not a paid advertisement for the Film Transfer Company. But anyway, so moving on. In 2012, I was really serious about getting this thing done because I was well aware that film is chemical. It's an emulsion. It's gonna break down and the color is gonna fade and you're gonna lose the video or the film. But still, back then, I didn't have a lot of resources to pay for the best service possible because the Film Transfer Company does offer several different packages depending on your budget. But since I knew that this film had been shot probably in not the best circumstances, I knew it was probably going to be underexposed because the wedding was at night, indoors, and not many people were very familiar with film back then, so it's not like now that we are used to having cameras around us all the time. We know how to frame, we know how to look for the best lighting, and back then you didn't have an LCD screen to tell you if you were overexposing or underexposing. So I was really apprehensive about the details of the transfer because I felt like I was only going to get one shot. I didn't want anybody touching this film unless it was the best possible transfer I could afford at the time. Since the best method of transferring it was still out of my reach, I was still researching more and more companies that offered film scanning to transfer to video. But I always kept coming back to the Film Transfer Company as they were the only company in the world that offered 4K scanning for your Super 8 films. But luckily, the planets aligned and I got a better job and the prices went down, so I could finally afford the best option to transfer my parents' wedding film to video. December 2018. I sent the 3 film cans that had been sitting there for 43 years, and about a week later, I got a standard Blu-ray with the wedding video, an archival quality Blu-ray that will last decades longer than the standard Blu-ray I also got, a hard drive with the 4K DPX image sequence of the entire wedding, and the film itself, re-spooled in a fancier can. This film had not been seen since 1975, mere weeks after the wedding in December 1974. Being seen only once helped with the fact that there's very few scratches in the film itself. And now looking at the wedding, I'm pleasantly surprised to see that many parts of the wedding were well exposed, but I can also see the work the Film Transfer Company put into this. The color correction was pretty good. I mean, you can only go so far, but the cleanup that they did on this was impressive. Like, I like grain, but let's be honest. When it comes to your family memories, you want to see the people. You don't want some artistic proposal to see how grainy you can get it and be off-putting as much as you can to make a statement. No, you want to see the people you love in glorious color and in the best possible shape. So what the Film Transfer Company has is actually a new algorithm that they developed to clean your film even more than they could before. And when we got to see the film in a big 4K television, I was shocked that my mom was recognizing people left and right, but not shocked because, it would be easy to identify people, right? No, it was because she was recognizing aunts and uncles that to me looked just like other kids. You literally were seeing teenagers and toddlers there in the wedding that I had never known as kids or toddlers. To me, they were adults forever. And also, let's keep remembering, she had not seen this footage for 43 years. Sound in movies was pretty rare back then, so my parents' wedding film didn't have any sound. We only had images to look at, but something was off about the movement of these images. At this point in time, we're all used to the stereotypical image of the silent film, which is silent, and it has either jerky motion or sped up motion, which gives it almost a comical look. And it makes sense because back in the silent era, there was no standard film speed. There were actually barely any motors to run film or operate a camera. So you would hand crank the actual film by hand, cranking the hand cranker. And that would give you an inconsistent speed. But in 1974, a typical Super 8 consumer camera was not hand cranked. Actually, it had a motor, and it was operated by a battery. So, what gives? I was noticing something off with these movements. Well, it turns out that back in 1974, or the 70s in general, all cameras came with two speeds. They either came with 24 frames per second and an option for 18 frames per second, which was obviously meant to fit more material in the same film can. Once I realized this was the case, I concluded this was most likely the speed chosen to film my parents' wedding. But this also turned out to be an advantage for the film. When you record at lower film speeds, that means that every frame gets more light going into it as opposed to a higher film speed. So think about this. If you have to split a certain amount of light in 24 frames or 24 instances, you get less light than if you just film at 18 frames. So it helped out. I don't think they were conscious about that decision back then. I think it was mostly for time and space. But it helped out in the end, so Film Transfer Company could restore more footage or more color back into this film. I went back to the DPX files the Film Transfer Company sent me on the hard drive, and I stretched out those 18 frames into a full second, so I get a more natural movement now, although the film now looks choppier. But that gets us into frame interpolation. Frame interpolation basically creates new frames between two. This is designed to make a video look smoother and have smoother motion instead of a typical choppy old film. Since 18 frames per second looks pretty choppy to us nowadays, I did frame interpolation to create 6 additional frames to give it a smoother look so it'll look like a traditional film. And that got me thinking, maybe I can go all the way and make it 60 frames per second, which would imply that I'd have to create 42 new images. But that's pretty automatic at this point. We don't have to go in between each frame and create that extra information. You can do it almost in, well, not in any software, but many software packages offer that. And your TV already does that as we speak. The thing is that your phone, your tablet, your laptop doesn't have frame interpolation built into it, so that's why I decided to do it through software so I can show this video on any platform and you would get a 4K 60 frames per second video from a wedding in 1974, which is awesome. With current technology, it's amazing the things we can do with old footage and old media. We can update its presentation to look a little sharper, to look a little bit more colorful, to correct past issues that might have been difficult to fix 10, 20 years ago, and we can bring it up to higher standards like 4K, 60 frames per second, and we can also make these videos look 3D. Literally, imagine a 4K 60 frames per second video from 1974 in 3D. I just thought of it today. I might actually do a little test to see if I can pull it off. I mean, I have experience in 3D, of course nothing before 2004, and also nothing as ambitious as 4K 60 frames per second and 3D. And if you go by pixel count, 4K 3D is pretty much IMAX 3D. So I can say that my parents' wedding video could be made into an IMAX 3D film. Will it look like an IMAX 3D film? No, but technically the pixel count is there. So stay tuned for the next video in which I'll fill you in on my family's history with stereo 3D, which is mostly from my experimenting, but we have a lot of video and pictures. So see you till next time.